Right, hello again everyone, and today's session is going to be about labeling and keyword maths, and if there's time at the end then it might be a free-for-all. We'll see how we go. Okay, so labeling has been around in Irricad for quite a number of versions, so quite a number of years. And most new releases end up with some enhancements to the label. So whether that is new keywords or a new way of doing things. One of the things that version 21 introduces was the capability to use most hydraulic labels with the combined pipe labels option. And then this will reduce the need to have a second label set. So if you're trying to label the same item with non-hydraulic keywords as well as hydraulic keywords, previously you had to have one in the label set 1 and then the other type in label set 2 with different label option settings to be able to get them to work. But with the release of version 21, that's no longer the case. The combined hydraulic labels will be applied to non-branching sections of pipe that are the same size type and where the angle tolerance is not exceeded. Okay, so that's the setting here, and you can set that to anything that you want it to be. So if you've got something that's quite bendy because it's running down quite a steep hill, then you can increase that to just have the one label over most of the pipe if that's what you want. So here's a wee example of some of the labels that will work with the combined hydraulic labels. So I've got maximum pressure, maximum absolute pressure, minimum absolute pressure, elevation change, head loss, maximum head loss, which system has the maximum pressure, which system has a minimum pressure, which system has a maximum head loss, and which system flow has the minimum head loss. So that's just a small example of what can be included. Where to use certain labels is sometimes something that you need to investigate. In the technical reference, there is a color-coded table which will assist in the correct use of keywords. So the green is for zone and the light blue is for mainline. And these keywords may work somewhat over the other types of items, but perhaps with a reduced capacity and perhaps showing something slightly different than what you would get if it's used on the correct item. And in the same appendices, there is also a list of the keywords and a list of the irrigation block entity labels. Though there have been some changes since since the main manual was last produced. So for example, the valve pressure used to only show the valve pressure attached to a block entity. It will now show the valve pressure for all valves. And another change has been num row. That would show the number of rows for laterals in a block, but it will also show the number of laterals connected to a submain pipe, as we'll see in a minute. So typically the irrigation block entity labels are based on the information to do with the entity as a whole. So a lot of these will be based on the fields that are available in the irrigation block entity dialogues. So things like the spacing, and then of course the block itself will know the number of emitters, the number of laterals, the spacing, the outlet description, mean pressure in the block, and things like that. But there's some labels with a difference. the multi-label for contour lines we introduced a few versions ago. So previous to that, if you wanted to label contour lines, you would only get one label per contour line, and it wasn't necessarily in a place that was best fitting for where you wanted it. So with the multi-label option, you can have multiple labels along the same contour line. And the way to produce that is first to turn on the contour labeling and the label settings as per normal. Select the contours that you want to label, and then instead of actioning create labels, you would action the multi-label option and you would get this result. So here I put them at about 300 feet distance. So depending on the size of your design will determine what sort of spacing you're happy with. Another label that I thought was a little bit different than the rest was the irrigation block submain head loss. So this is actually the only way where you can get a total of the submain head loss in Irricad. You can't get it from the, sorry, I just need to turn off Leo. I forgot about him. You can't actually get a total of the submain head losses out of the reports, but you can with this particular label. Just be aware that it will only label up to where there's a branch, if there's a branching submain, and if there is, it will just do the main part, the part that has the most flow. So it will leave off the little branch if you have a little one and a big one. The number of lateral sizes connected to each submain size. So this is the irrigation block label that I mentioned before, that if applied to zone pipe will tell you how many laterals have been attached to each zone pipe size. So we've got 35 attached to this color or this size of pipe and 34 to that one. Label sets. So we've got label set 1 and label set 2. And if you still want to use these, as in my little example below, I'm labeling each pipe segment with its flow and head loss, or you might want to do velocity or something like that. And then another label, which is going to be a combined pipe label, which is just the description and the length of it. So the reason to use different label sets for the same item is because you want to have different settings, so different label options. So for the, in this case, the hydraulic labels, I want on every segment, I would untick combined pipe labels. And in the other label set, I would have the description and the length, which is going to be a combined pipe label. And when you are using different label sets for the same item, make sure you do set different positions for it, or else they'll be on top of each other, or potentially on top of each other. So here I've put label set 1 on top and label set 2 on the below the pipe. Keyword maths. So instead of just relying on the currently available keywords, you can use keyword maths to create new ones. And the format is basically a keyword, and then inside that last hash, we're going to put an operator and something inside square brackets. So the operator can be addition, subtraction, multiplication, division to the power of, or the percentage, something like that. And the number can be a constant or another keyword. So I've got some examples here. We've got total lateral length, and if we're saying that they come in rolls of 100, we can divide that by 100. So the constant is in the square brackets. And we can also still round that number. So if we want that number rounded to the closest whole digit, then, or whole number rather, then we can use that semicolon to round to 1. We can also round and add additional constants. So just note that the labels use Swiss rounding. So if it's under 0.5, it will round down. If it's over 0.5, it will round up. So this example is quite helpful for that, to say, okay, tell me the number of rows to the closest whole number, but add 0.5 so that if it is below, if the raw number is below 0.5, it's going to give us another roll, is going to round up instead of round down. And as I mentioned, the number can be another keyword. So here we've got the maximum head loss divided by the 3D length of the item, or probably a pipe that we've selected here. There's also the option to have keyword maths inside a keyword maths. So here we've got, key 1, which is the actual flow, the operator, which is divide by, and then inside the square brackets, we have another keyword operator and a constant or other keyword. And just note that these have the hashes in the right place and that everything is contained within the original keywords hash. So actual flow divided by the number of emitters divided by 1,000. And you can round both keywords as well. So here I've got the maximum head loss rounded to 0.001 and the 3D length rounded to 0.0001. Just note that the head loss label in the labels will tell you the frictional loss, but the reports, the zone full report and the mainline full report, will be reporting on the friction loss plus the elevation change. So if you want your label to show the same number that your report is showing, you want to add the elevation change to the maximum head loss number for that pipe segment. And also just be aware that, well, you've probably used min and max labels depending on what you're doing, but just be aware that using that can slow down the labeling a little bit, depending on how large your design is. Simply because Irricad has to go through and evaluate the minimum and maximums to pull out the right number. But if you are looking for pressure, minimum and maximum pressures, then show zone pressure limits is quicker because it does the minimum maximum at the same time and can populate the screen accordingly. There is an option to use keyword maths to simplify the UID. So there might be different reasons why you might want to do this. Some of those reasons have been superseded by the introduction of the node names tool in version 20. But if you want to use the UID offset, what that does is it allows you to specify a specific number. So instead of having these huge numbers, particularly when you've imported a whole lot of background information into Irricad, that you can specify where you want the numbering to start from, whether the introduction of the hydraulic items into the design has started. And you would need to know which item you place first. So in my example, if we want the water supply to be number 1, we would have had to have put the water supply in before any other hydraulic items. Now just note that the elevations are also counted as hydraulic items. So if they've come in first, as typically they are, then we can rightly start with, if we place the water supply next, that can be number 1. So in this example, we have UID minus 17,500 because the water supply's UID is 17,501. So if we take off 17,500, then we end up with the external UID for the water supply to be 1, and we can label the hydraulic nodes consecutively from that first item or from that water supply. And there is also a data field for mainline reports to use the UID offset as well, and make those reports a little bit more readable because you're starting from 1 rather than from 17,500 and up. But as I've said, this has been superseded by the node names in version 20, and zone reports at this stage do not have a UID offset option available, but that might change in the near future. We've also got conditional keywords. So we can use greater than and less than, and we can put in particular words rather than values. The first example I have there is to only labeling the pipes where the velocity is greater than 6 foot per second. So my limit on the velocity for this design was 6.5 or 6.6. But if I want to know which pipes are over 6 foot per second, of course, you probably want to use this as more problem finding out where problems are than just labeling pipes, but I've set it to 6. So if true, so if the velocity is greater than 6, it's going to label those pipes with the velocity value because of the way that I've written that. You can also label it with words or other values instead of just saying label it with the velocity. If it's over a certain value, you can put words with it. So you can put, say, over or under, and you don't need to have a false option. You can leave that out completely so that you can only see only the ones that are over would be labeled with the word, and the ones that are under wouldn't be. There is also an option to include or not include the unit, depending on what you want. So you can actually add those, actually add the val or value option into the keyword to make sure that you get the unit the way that you want it or not want it to be. And another conditional keyword is regulated. So this was the option for irrigation block entities. So this is when you tick that little regulated checkbox, which means that there is some sort of regulator at the start of the tape or the spray line. You can now label your block entities to say that this is that this block is regulated. And we can read about how to use that specifically in the release notes. And there's also a keyword to say what the regulator pressure is, but that isn't conditional. That is just bringing out the set pressure. There are some situations where labels might not appear on the screen, and the most common causes are that the items were not selected before actioning the Create Label tool, or that the label type was not enabled, which is that checkbox in the label settings for each type of item that you want to label. If your check label length is enabled and the size of the label, so that's your text size drives this, is longer than the length of the item, then you won't get anything. The first thing that I do is go back and either turn off check label length so I can see what size it is and then resize things, or just change the text size of the particular label and try again. The label layer might not be turned on. So traditionally that was the Irricad layer. In version 21, we've added 4 more default layers, and one of them is a label layer. So this should be containing your labels, unless you've specified otherwise, your labels, and some, if not all, of the different graphical reporting that is, is there a reports label, reports layer as well? Yeah, so labels will go into the labels layer in version 21, unless you've specified a particular layer in the settings for those, for particular items. And the use of label sets, so make sure that you have the correct use label set option turned on that matches what you're trying to create. So if you've told it to use label set 2 and label set 1, if both label sets are off, then you won't get anything because you haven't turned on the correct label set that you want to use. And in Irricad Link, there is the added advantage of how they do their labeling and text and everything. And the multi-leader style settings is what controls the label. So they're not symbols as they are in standalone, they're multi-leader styles, and they need to not be annotative. And you need to make sure that the label to uses the current style. And I have seen a situation where an imported design had the same style name as what we use for our labels. And because that was annotative, it didn't work. So just make sure that they're not annotative. So that's all for the PowerPoint. Did we want to go through some examples?
That would be great, Jo.
Okay. Let me share the new screen. Okay, most of the sorry, you need to go away. Thank you. Most of the label information is found in the release notes. So this will be the more recent information that we need to look up here. And one way to find it is to search for things like math. If that's the stuff that you need to concentrate on and find out about, then we can look at keyword maths. And here we've got the one about the UID and the UID offset. But typically in most versions, there is a label enhancement section. And here we can see that way back in version 17 is when we introduced conditional keywords for labeling. And this is what I've done here, is I've labeled it with the velocity, only the pipes that are over velocity. Now, one thing that to note is that when you've actually got a label, all you need to do is update the labels. So this particular one, I had a space down here, which is why these ones that weren't labeled end up with a space. So if I've taken that out, I just need to go update labels. And here, let's have a look. Let's make this regulated at the start. We need to put in a minimum sub-main pressure. And that means that I can now label my irrigation block. Whoops, sorry, settings, labels, with the reg pressure option. Sorry, I actually need the release notes to help me with this. Okay, so this will be an irrigation block keyword. Okay, so we can put in the value true or false. So that means that when we create the label, and I think I'm going to want to, oh no, we'll try that. Select the item, action, the create labels. Okay, so it says true here. Now you can replace those keywords, as I mentioned earlier. You know, you can replace the true and false with actual information. So here we can say regulating, take away the false. So if it's not regulating, we don't care. We don't want a label. So when we update that, it's going to tell us information such as that. There is another label as well that can be used with this, which is reg press, and it displays a downstream regulating for regulated tapes and spray lines. So that is a tape label, not an irrigation block label. So if we go up to tapes and say, okay, what's your reg press? And we can select it from the drop down list. Actually, let's select a few different things. Oops, not you. And create the labels. Okay, so it tells me what the regulating pressure is. And sorry, those other things didn't. Oh, sorry, I didn't put it in there and for the pipes, of course. But if you select other pipes like zone and mainline, they'll be labeled as not regulated if they have that keyword put in for them. So if it's tapes and spray lines, they'll say regulated. Oh, sorry, they'll give the actual pressure of the regulation. And actually, if I turn that off and update that, it'll say not regulated if that checkbox is not enabled. But you probably wouldn't want this on all of your tapes, so you would just select the ones that you want to label. Probably the other thing to point out is that you can have multiple labels in the in any of the dialogues, any of the label setting dialogues, and you can add them really to your heart's content. So what we can do for our irrigation blocks is quite often there's quite a lot of information that you want to put in there. And so we can do things like the name, and you need to click to be able to go enter. So I actually find it easier just to add all of the keywords that I want, and then add in the carriage returns, etc. afterwards. And we've got units to go with most of these as well. Now, some of these items are just going to end up as numbers on a screen, which isn't going to be very helpful. So you can actually add your own text. So if we go number of lats and then put in the keyword, it means that in the label, we're just not going to get a number that we don't know what it relates to after the fact. So we want num lats or num row. How about, oops, sorry, that's why you need to click or else you get the keyword again. Let's do spacing. Oh, sorry, what is that? That would be, sorry, my mind's gone blank. There we go, lat space. So we're going to put in some text with that as well. We can put in the block flow. Now, just note that if you are using non-pressure compensated emitters, that the actual flow will be calculated from what is inside the irrigation block. And if the pressures that are actually received are quite different from the pressures that you specified in the dialogue that you were aiming for, you might get, in some circumstances, quite different values. So the valve flow will tell you the actual flow that is going through the control valve. And we want the flow unit with that one. And what else? Valve pressure. And pressure unit. And how about the shift number or the system flow number? So we want to specify that so we know what the number is. And we might even want to put in the sub-main head loss with the pressure unit. Okay, so if we update our, sorry, I think it's gone, and also I want to change the position of it. Sorry, position is all the way over here. So I want it in the middle, so in line. And just note that it says default, which means it's going to end up on my labels layer. And sorry, there is a reports layer which will have your graphical reports placed on that. So let's go OK, select the item we want to label, and then go to tools, create labels, and it's forgotten its design. Okay, so here we can see the name of the item, which is area number 1. We've got the, I need to put a carriage return in here. We've got 7.93 acres, number of laterals, the spacing. Okay, I don't have a distance unit there. And here we can see it hasn't been assigned to a shift yet. So we've got flow, pressure, submain head loss through that. So as you can see, we can put any number of keywords inside the same label. Or if you need to split them up, that's when you would use the label setting. I wonder why that stayed on the same line. Okay, we've got distance. Sorry, my mind's gone blank again. There's a distance unit in here somewhere. I just can't
I think it's
remember.
length unit, Joe.
Thank you. Length unit, there we go. And let's update. Sorry, tools, update. And we can get rid of that other label that's underneath. Oh, now, if you don't know, what I've done is I'm holding down the control key when I click, and it brings up the different items in the vicinity, so I can select the one that I want to delete. That saves turning off layers and all sorts of things to try and get there. So are there any questions about labeling?
Yep. Shift in Kiwi speakers set or system flow.
Yes, it is system flow. The keyword is shift, and in different places around the world call it something differently. So yeah, you can put system flow definitely as you know, the identifier, but the keyword is shift. And actually, if we go to, as I was talking about before, help topics, technical reference, keywords for labels or plots, label keywords. So this is our list of keywords. There's been a few more added since then. And here's the table I was talking about that just helps you see where the most appropriate item to use these particular keywords for. And as you can see, that they may work somewhat for zone items if they're a mainline keyword, but some of them will not work. For example, these ones for zone will not work on mainlines.
One of the people here, Joe, had an asterisk in the center of every label. The label was correct, but there was an asterisk in the center.
Okay, so what version was it for?
I think that's the latest version. And I wondered if he had somehow turned construction points on.
Oh, so he got the label as well as asterisks.
Yes, and it was just one asterisk.
I would have to see it to know. Actually, I did get it. But the reason why older versions will often get stars is if you have any of these hydraulic labels and combined pipes. Combined pipe labels on, then you would get stars because you couldn't have combined pipe labels with hydraulic labels. So you should have less incidence of that now. However, I had it the other day because I was thinking, I know there's a keyword to get the number of laterals connected to a submain, but I was mistakenly thinking it was the num man row keyword, which was the number of laterals connected to a flushing manifold. And I was trying to use that on my submain, and I just kept getting stars all the time. So yes, if you're using the wrong keyword in the wrong place, then you may well get stars. But if you get an asterisk, if you get an asterisk and the keyword, I'm not actually sure what that means. It didn't accidentally have an asterisk in the typed in.
No, I don't think so. I
Okay.
think in Visual CAD, there's a command to turn construction points on and off, and I wonder if the two
Yeah, it wouldn't be an asterisk though. It would be like a spot height,
okay.
like a little cross. Yeah.
Kind of a related question, and this came out in the pivot module. Is there a way to change the size of the pressure limits symbols?
Yes. Report settings has the information about the labeling. So here we've got what keywords it's using. Here you've got your symbol size. Here you've got where it's going to be placed, what layer, background, etc. Okay, so that's in reports, report settings.
And the default layer would be reports?
It would be now, yes.
Yeah.
It was probably Irricad in older versions.
Okay.
So for those of you who aren't aware, you can label your zone pressure limits. You can either select particular valves or go all valves. And here it tells us what our maximum pressure is in the zone and what our minimum pressure is in the zone. Oh, and see, I'm getting stars down here. For the flushing manifold, which would have been included with the zone pipe, where I said, you know, what's the velocity? And it's given me stars instead.
So at the moment, for labeling, there's no way of separating flush pipe from zone pipe?
Only by what you select.
Okay.
Yeah, so if it's not in this category, then either it can't be labeled or it's in with something else. So your manifold flush pipe would be part of the zone pipe option. You can also label the direction of flow for your mainline pipes. And to do that, you need to couple it with the system flow number that you are wanting to use. So if we just have a look at the release notes here, and I don't know what version it is. Okay, so you would use you first need to tell it which flow for which system flow you want. So if you use a HY flow keyword, and then you put in a tilde and then the system flow number, then you can tell it to show you what the flow direction is for that flow. There is a method to change to use different symbols here, using the ASCII code character. I'm not sure if I had much success with that. at the time, but whether that's a little bit different now, I'm not sure. So here we can see the, the flow direction for system flow number 2. And then you can also see what the flow is in the flow unit if that's the way that you want to do it. So that is for mainline pipes only. Any other questions to do with labelling?
The area of the label, I have an example on her request. If we characters just extend that, if they would go too far, what happens?
If the label is going to be too long for the space for it, it won't appear at all. If you are trying to apply a hydraulic label to something that won't give you a hydraulic label, you'll get the asterisks. So in that case, it would give you velocity for the submain pipe, but not for the flush pipe.
Actually, the better one is probably... Yeah, so here we can see that the it's given a combined pipe 1. This is a hydraulic labeling that's been enabled, and there's actually, I put a little one in there for different options, you know, flow and direction and things like that. But that will only label to a certain point. So actually, if I delete them, easy way, right click on the layer and go create labels. We'll see as soon as there's a break or a valve or a branch coming off the main line, we're going to be getting a different label. So this is actually, if I move this, is actually for this segment of pipe below here. But yes, in older versions, you would just get stars for all of those hydraulic labels with the combined pipe labels enabled. But in version 21, it works quite well.
And you selected all the mainline pipe by right-clicking over the mainline layer?
Yes, exactly. So it's a very, very easy way to select things. Oh, there's nothing in there. That's okay. So you can select layer entities, and you can also move selected entities very easily to different layers. If I turn that one back on, it's on the reports layer now. So it's quite a neat attribute of the layer bar. It's one of the things I really miss in Link, actually, be able to do all the things we can do with our layer bar that you can't do in Irricad Link. But of course, Irricad Link has other nice features that you don't have in standalone, which I miss also. Things like being able to click on an item and view the database information for that item and just make sure it's correct without having to go into the database. And also the things like checking what's connected and things works much better in Irricad Link.
Did you hear that, Jo? Steve,
No, sorry.
Question is, of the new features, what's your favorite?
Probably the document feature. Oops, let's go back to 21. Oh no, actually probably the rectangular spray patterns, not that I'll probably use it, but it looks quite cool. Being able to put in those rectangular spray patterns for outlets. you know, then you can actually see what those particular sprinklers are doing, and that's quite fascinating, really, when you've been used to circular radiuses, you know, from the year dot. But the combined hydraulic labeling is probably going to be the most useful for the most, you know, the highest number of users, I would say. But probably what I would use the most would be this database sort order option that you can turn off. The you know how you can double click on the, oh, actually, I'll bring this up. And I won't, because I broke it playing around with some stuff yesterday. Sorry, I broke my ODBC driver. So you know how you can double click on the different columns in the database grid and order them that way. When you put new items into Irricad, the new method that the method that the new database format uses means that everything is straight away put into its order based on the registry order. And when you're trying to attach nozzles to a new sprinkler, for example, to not be able to find that straight away because it's not at the bottom like it was in the, well, it's probably pre-version 20, I think. But you can turn off the database sort now, and it will always be at the bottom because it's based on the UID, or the order of entry of these items. So personally, I use that a lot because I'm doing stuff with databases. But I think for users, the combined hydraulic labeling is probably going to be the most useful, and the additional default layers as well.